Hey everyone, welcome back to the Power Baseball League. Last week we talked about creating views and some of the opportunities you have there. So now we're going to take those views and start making that data visible in a chart. So we're going to show you some of the visualizations you have available so you can start brainstorming your data. I think in the upcoming weeks, we're going to talk about how you would then take these views and charts and put those on dashboards. And keep in mind, we can continue to extend this with Power BI. I don't know if we're going to get into that in one of these sessions, but those are some other options that you have available. So I'm going to pass it over to Malcolm, who's going to show you how to create a chart.
Sounds good. I'm excited to do so. So I'm going to pull up the screen here in just a second. So you should be seeing that pop up. So what we've got, we kind of did a quick brainstorm in terms of what we should focus on. And when we thought through the context of the organization we're doing this for, one of the things we know they're going to want is to understand how much revenue or how much registration fee data they, or amount rather, that they're bringing in based on each individual season. So we've got some sample data set up that we imported in previous video, and we've updated a couple of things just to make sure we've got a bit of variance in terms of the data, and we're going to build a chart off of that. It's going to be pretty simplistic for the first run, just to get you familiar with the basics of how to do this, and then we're going to do a couple things. I'm going to build it out first. I'm going to share that over with Kylie. Kylie's going to actually export it and import it in to the solution. So some cool stuff. And by exporting and importing, she's going to make it from just a personal view. She's going to actually turn it into a system view from there. So a couple of different things to cover here. So we've got a grid pulled up here on screen, and we're just going to go ahead and start new. Now, some of you are going to see this and say, well, why don't you just build it as a system view for starters, which is totally a valid point. The reason we do this is really personal preference, and this is just a habit that I got into a long time ago, where I would start to sort of mess around with the different charts, because if you've ever started to build these out, you'll realize that sometimes you build one and you're like, that's not at all what I thought it was going to look like. I'm going to scrap that and go back to the drawing board. This is a quick and easy way to do that, where you can just build them. You're the only one seeing them. We're not having to mess around with publishing them, going and checking them, refreshing. I'm going to build it. It's going to show up almost right away. I can mess around with it, get it to a place that I want, and then we'll use the export import option to get it into a system view. So again, personal preference on that, but this is how we like to roll through these. So one of the things we talked about, as I said, the example was to put out registration data. So, and I close that one. We'll open up this one, and we want to look at that registration data based on how much. So first what are we counting? That's what we're doing first and foremost. So I want to count the amount that they've paid, which is just a field that we have on our record, and that gets pulled in every time somebody creates a registration. We're tracking how much they paid for that, and so that's come in here, and we've got some options here. We can average that out. We can do a full count of how many are there. We can do the max or the min or the sum, and in this case, we just want to do the sum. We also then on the horizontal, so the bottom axis, right, is what we want to look at, and we want to know that by the season that we're applying that registration to. And so what that shows us up in the little preview is we've got a couple of different columns. And so we've got 2020 was some information. We brought in a little bit there. And then you can see 2021 is well off. We've got far more registrations coming in. And again, if you had lots of years, you had many years that you've been doing this, you're going to see all columns for all the years, right? So this is handy. This gives us what we're looking for initially. Now we could start building this out. Kylie, you had an idea about how we might want to segment this.
Yeah, I think the one thing we were talking about was what if we added in age? And what's cool about our age is that that is not stored on the registration, right? That's stored on the contact record. So you'll notice that field that Malcolm just added has in parentheses applicant, and that's because it's a related field. So we're able to pull it in because it's in the view. So that's kind of a quick tip and trick when you're creating your views that these charts are based on. If you think you're going to need data from a linked entity, go ahead and pull it in there so then you can use it in your chart. Perfect. Also, then when we look at this, we can decide, does this chart option still make sense? You know, maybe we want to change the chart type to make it better fit.
Yeah, so that's a perfect call out, because that's the first thing that jumped out at me, right? And it is, wow, that's cool because I see what it's doing in terms of those being ages, but it's really busy and it makes it a little hard with the different lines. And if you think you've got age group, in the scenario that we're talking about here, we've got kids registering from like 6 years old up to 16. You could have 10 different colors all the way up. That's a lot. We're still going to see a lot, but it might clean it up a little bit if we change that to a stacked column. And so it's going to look a little bit different, and it just condenses everything and makes it a little cleaner. Probably, again, personal preference based on the business, right, need and how do you want to see this information. But for the purposes of this, I think this speaks to what we want to do. So that's it for starters. That's all we want to do. We maybe actually want to change the name, whoops, right here, because it's going to automatically name it based on what you've built in. So you can see it's amount paid, and it's just taking the name from the legend here, and then by this and this, right? That makes sense. We could leave it like that, and it would probably be logical for people. I'm going to change it to fees, whoops, not fees, fees by season and age. And I'm going to save and close that. And so I mentioned earlier that's going to pop up immediately. And so right away we see our amounts and bucketed by ages right here. So if I hover over any one of these, I can see the total amount that age bracket has contributed. And so in terms of like how do you interpret this, what would this be useful for? One of the areas that I would think that an organization would look at in this context would be maybe one of these. Now, we did a lot of sort of a couple of examples in each one, but if you think of a real life scenario, you're going to see a lot more information in one age bracket and a lot less in another. So that tells you two things, at least two things. First, whatever you're doing in terms of getting news out about and getting registrations collected for your season, it's going well for that particular age group. If you have a really small amount in another, that suggests maybe you're not targeting that age group properly. Again, we're talking about baseball registrations, but this would apply to really any business, right? What we're talking about is, are we doing a good job marketing our product to an audience based on a certain category or demographic? So in this scenario, if we saw a really small box, like let's say that was the 9s and 10-year-olds, maybe we would do some thinking about, okay, we're putting our flyers up and we're putting all of our targeted messaging out this way. Maybe that's not where parents of 10 and 11-year-olds are congregating or looking, so maybe we need to think of other places that we could put our information out to catch their attention and get them into our funnel. So that's the option.
Can we also quickly show how you can drill down on this chart? We didn't talk about that, but if let's say you click on our 10-year-olds at the bottom, because there's a lot of them, and then you'll have the ability to choose. You'll see that when we select that, it filters our view so you can see those records, but you also could choose another piece of data on that record and make that into another chart or something like that. So in this case, it's not really revealing anything super valuable, but in some other cases, this could be really cool. Or if we started with our original chart, right, that was just looking at the fee by season, we would have the ability to divide it down by age on a kind of drilling down like that if we wanted to. So that's just a cool thing to teach your users that they can take advantage of.
Yeah, and just to give context, that's good. It's a great call out. And so I'm going to try it a slightly different way because this age group looks like it has a couple of different ones. So what was that? That was division. And you can see you can pick any of the different charts. So maybe this time I'll do a pie chart. And it's going to give us a pie. Oh, that didn't help. No, they're both immediate. I didn't look at that. So either way, right, I'm sure you get the point. If you had like a couple of junior, a couple of intermediate, a couple of senior, you're basically drilling down through and getting information about that subset of data. You also probably notice that as we click that, the data on the right is going to align with whatever we've picked. So we're now in this age category. Here are the records that make up that part of the chart, which is super handy. Really good, especially when you're dealing with massive amounts of data, to be able to drill down and just say, okay, but I only really want to see this group. You click that, boom, you're now looking at the small amount. So in terms of structure for building, there's probably some changes. One of the things I don't love is the order of these, right? So you can see here we've got, I'm just going to click in the white space to get back to where we were. You can see it goes 9, 16, 15, 12, 11. So it makes sense that it's skipping certain numbers, but I don't love that it's not in the order that I want, right? to me, it makes sense that it would go in the right order in terms of age. Frankly, I don't know how it would fix that right away. This would be a good scenario where we dive into some research and start, using our friend Google and other sources to look up information and try and find some resources on how to do that. Kylie, any ideas where we might look for that?
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. There's this great resource called CRM Chart Guy, and Ulrich does a great job of maintaining lots of resources there for editing your charts. And if we have time at the end, we'll quickly show you there's also a XRM Toolbox tool for that we can look at that allows you to do some of those modifications. I don't know off the top of my head how to do this one, but lots of other cool things that we can check out, especially a common one that seems silly to admins, but can make a big difference to users is things like changing the colors and just making them not be these kind of standard ugly Microsoft colors, which is something that we can do really easily using that chart editor.
That's awesome, right? You want your colors to be branded. That simple change in itself, especially when you're thinking about who's looking at this. If leadership and management are looking at this chart and it's their branded colors, now they can just grab a screenshot of that and show it to somebody else or pull it into a report or something, and it's already got all the right colors. That's an awesome call out. So let's pivot a little bit now out of here and let's talk about how do we get this. And we're going to flip the screen over, but before Kylie can export this and import it, I have to share this over with her because right now she doesn't have access to it. This is just my own. And so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to open up the share option and it'll open up into how to share this. It's going to take a minute because I'm screen sharing.
Yeah, and I think as that's pulling up, that's such a good call out when we start thinking about the personal versus system views, charts, and dashboards, right? Anything personal is always going to need to be shared with whoever is using it. So when we get to talking about dashboards, and a dashboard has a view and a chart and the dashboard, all three of those components need to be shared with whoever is supposed to view it. So in that case, what I like to do if you're creating a personal dashboard is create a team right at the beginning. And so every view you create and every chart you create, you can share as you go along, and then just share the dashboard at the end, right, to make sure that you've not missed anything, because that definitely is annoying when you get to the end and realize you have to go back and find all the components to share, or just create it as a system dashboard from the beginning.
Yeah, for sure. So that was perfectly timed because now we have our share user chart, and I'm just going to go ahead and give this access to Kylie. And to her point, I already know the views shared because it's a system view that we use for this. It's active registrations. She already has that. It's just the chart that I need to share for now. All right, so now I've got this section. I'm just going to type in Kylie's name, and I find hers, add it, and I'm going to give her full rights to this across the board. She can do whatever she wants with it. Now, keep in mind, when you're sharing records, that's right, it is dangerous. I'm doing this because we're kind of co-adminning this and we're building this out and solutioning it. But if you're sharing, understand that if you say somebody can delete it, they can delete it. If you say they can write it, they can change it. And that means they're changing it for you too. If they delete it, they're deleting it for you too. That chart will be gone. So just keep that in mind as you're looking at these permissions. And there's lots of great articles and blogs out there about what all these mean and how to think about them. All right, so that's shared over to you. And then I'm going to go ahead and stop. You can take over.
All right, cool. Now we're looking at this. Let's make sure we can see Malcolm's chart. Perfect. So what I'm going to do now is I want to export this chart so I can import it as a system chart. As we said, you don't need to do it this way, but we wanted to do it this way to be cool. So you see we have that downloaded. Now, one thing we wanted to point out, so here in the Maker portal, you see we're looking at our registration entity, at our charts, and we do not have an option here to import a chart. So what I did have to do prior to this call is I did switch over to Classic, and then in our Classic area, we're looking at charts, and here we can import. The one thing we'll note, when you create a new system chart, that view looks identical to what we were just looking at on Malcolm's screen. It's just I like to be able to save it and see it with the data and play with it quickly. But let's go here and we're going to import, choose file.
Did you export it?
I did.
Oh, I didn't even see it. You're so fast.
Down at the bottom. All right, there we go. Import. And then we're going to see this guy is now a system chart. So let's save and publish him quickly. And then we can pop over and make sure we're seeing him in the chart area. So let's refresh here. Now if I go show chart, we'll see here I have under my charts, and I also have it under system charts. So that means it would be available to all users that can access this entity or this app, right? And I think charts is similar when we're configuring our model-driven app. We can choose if you want to show or hide all of them, right? So I think in the past when you had you would use a system or a personal chart or a personal dashboard because you didn't want everyone to have access. But now you can control that with different model-driven apps and things like that. So the desire to keep some things personal probably is a little less there than before. The other thing I quickly wanted to show us in like 2 minutes is within the XRM toolbox, we do have this advanced chart editor, which allows us to do some of the more advanced things, as I mentioned. So let's click on our registration entity. We'll see our new chart here, and we can actually click to edit, and right from here, you can edit the XML, which is what's designing the chart behind the scenes. You see we have our palette here, that this is where you can change to make the columns what you want, make the colors what you want, and you can also use this visual editor to kind of design extra items here. So we can set different properties, we can set the colors, are right in here somewhere, lots of stuff. So definitely a good idea to play around with if you're trying to learn more, trying to make your charts extra beautiful. This is a great place to start.
It's really worth poking around too, because when you first open it up and you see all that XML, if you're a non-dev type and you see that, it's first instinct is like close this down and go away. But poke around a little bit. That visual editor is really, really handy to give you flexibility for like the citizen devs. I don't want to use air quotes because that is a thing. There's lots of those out there. And so it just gives you the ability to do it without having to really dig into the code. That said, there's tremendous resources out there that even as myself, non-developer for sure, but taking some of those resources, some of them, the chart guide that we called out earlier and some of the other resources, they give you step-by-step detail on exactly what to do, and they'll tell you exactly what to change and how to change it. And so, if you're always working not in your production, always working in a sandbox, give it a shot and give it a try. You'll be amazed if you follow everything step by step. That it's pretty cool to make a change like that, save the XML, put it back in, and away you go. And those changes show up. That's pretty cool. So lots of great resources out there, but they're trying to give you the tools to do it no matter what your comfort level is, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, and that was a great call out when you're talking about different environments, right? So if you have a user in your production who is just making some stellar charts for themselves, you could still export their personal chart and import it as a system chart in your lower environments and then roll it through for everyone. So that's a great way to kind of take what your power users are doing and then get it rolled out for everyone. So thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed our quick overview of charts and gave you some ideas to get started. And we'll look forward to seeing you back next week. Thanks.
You bet. Thanks, everybody.